Hello, everyone. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are continuing The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, starting with Chapter 10. Reading updates. I finished There by Tommy Orange. It was middle of the road for me. Um, like 90 or 85% of it, something like that, was very much character based. So if you're not like a character based type of person, then you're probably going to lose your interest. But it's about these different people who are living in Oakland and they all have a tie together, in that they're all indigenous, but also like in such a small-ish community that they somehow are, related in some way. Um, and each chapter is a different person's perspective, and it all culminates to this big powwow that's happening in Oakland. And yeah, it is very, very character. There's one chapter that it's in second person, and I don't know why it's in second person. And if I find out, I will tell you. But there's only one chapter in second person, and it's bothersome. It's terrible, terrible. And I started Aviva versus the Dybbuk. I couldn't be bothered with a bookmark. It's just like laying like this over here. It is about this 11-year-old girl who's dealing with a lot of things. She lost her dad in, I'm assuming, the accident that keeps getting brought up. But she lives in a small Jewish community and she's having issues at school. And she also is the only person who can see this Dybbuk. And a Dybbuk is a soul of somebody who has passed, but they can't go on, like, they can't leave this realm of existence because they have something like unfinished business. And this Dybbuk is just causing havoc. Just everywhere is things are happening. And Aviva is having issues at school and all of these other things. And I was reading it. It's a pretty short book. It's under 200 pages. And I am reading it for a book club that I'm part of. And I didn't know anything about it when I picked it up. And I'm reading it, and it seemed pretty like juvenile, just like the writing style. And I looked into it, and it is. It's like, oh geez, like a chapter book. So it's shelved in like the elementary section. But it is interesting. I do think that a lot of the themes and stuff that are in the book are interesting. It would be interesting to have it written as an adult novel. I feel like it would resonate stronger for me, but I know that I'm not like the intended audience. So that makes sense. But it's all right. It's all right. Anyway, today we're reading The Phantom of the Opera, and we are starting with chapter 10. Let's see if I remember where we started last time. I think it was, I don't remember. Let's do an overview. Just a broad overview. Okay, so we have new owners to this theater, and the old owners have given this memorandum saying that there is an opera ghost and you need to leave this one box seat open each night for the opera ghost, and you also have to pay. And the owners are like, yeah, sure, this is weird. They find out that when the seats are taken, weird things happen. Just terribly weird, uncomfortable things happen. So they go in and stay for a show there, and they experience the weirdness of the opera ghost. And so they now know, like, okay, it's not a practical joke, like, something is happening. While all of this is going on, we have Christine, who is one of the performers in the theater, and her dad was an amazing violinist and he passed away, And before he passed away, he was seen by the music ghost? Music, I don't remember. Some mystical being that like gives you like the ability for music, like enhances your ability for music. And he's like, you will see this person too. And so Christine is like, maybe. And so she is seen by him, and he is giving her lessons in the theater, and nobody can see him. She can hear him, but doesn't really see him. And there's a lot of rumors going around about this ghost that's in the theater. Deaths, broken legs, all of these things are being attributed to this opera ghost. And on one of the performances, the ghost has a list of demands of what he wants to happen. And he doesn't want the lead to be part of it. He wants Christine to be part of it. He wants Christine, who is the understudy, to be performing the lead role. That goes ignored, along with a lot of other things that the ghost wants, and terrible things happen. The lead, like, she is unable to sing. Like, she just keeps croaking, like, horribly. A chandelier falls, shatters, and br- like really seriously injures a lot of spectators, a lot of patrons, and kills one person. And that one person was supposed to take over the place of the box office person who the new managers fired because they said that she was crazy because she was doing all of these things to ensure that the opera ghost was okay. Um, Oh, and then we have our friend, oh, what's his name? Raoul. And Raoul is madly in love with Christine. And Christine is trying to keep him at a distance because of the opera ghost, her music savior. His name is Erik. And she's trying to keep him at a distance, and Raoul just like refuses. And so Christine like has Raoul meet her at the masked ball and tells him what to wear and all of these things. And at the meet, like they meet at this ball, and she's like, "Look, we can't see each other ever again. Like, it just can't happen." And Raoul is like not taking it well, as he is inclined to do. And so he is distressed, he's distraught, he leaves, he goes into Christine's dressing room and is just like shouting and just like really upset. And then he hears somebody coming in, so he hides, and it's Christine. And Christine comes in and is just like really upset about this. Everything is all dramatic. And then we hear this singing voice singing a line from Romeo and Juliet, and it just keeps repeating. And Raoul has almost like a fever dream. He just sees many different Christines and is unable to communicate with her and unable to like tap her on the shoulder, like nothing. And what we are left with, let me see if this is like the last thing that we heard. Yes. What we are left with was Christine like crying and sighing and just being like, oh, Erik. And Raoul, who's hiding, is like, who the heck is Erik? I'm sad. I'm upset. It should be, oh, poor Raoul. And so Christine leaves, and he's left with this thought of, who is Erik? And that's where we left off. So, let's do it. Chapter 10. Forget the name of the man's voice. The day after Christine had vanished before his eyes in a sort of dazzlement that still made him doubt the evidence of his senses, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny called to inquire at Mamma Valerius's. Mamma Valerius is who Christine had been staying with. He came upon a charming picture. Christine herself was seated by the bedside of the old lady, who was sitting up against the pillows, knitting. The pink and white had returned to the young girl's cheeks. The dark rings round her eyes had disappeared. Raoul no longer recognized the tragic face of the day before, If the veil of melancholy over those adorable features had not still appeared to the young man as the last trace of the weird drama in whose toils that mysterious child was struggling, he could have believed that Christine was not its heroine at all. It always takes me a minute to be like, oh yes, this is not how I speak. And I just need to like slow down for a second to reacquaint myself with the style. But it is what it is. She rose, without showing any emotion, and offered him her hand. But Raoul's stupefaction was so great that he stood there dumbfounded, without a gesture, without a word. "Well, Monsieur de Chagny," exclaimed Mamma Valerius, "don't you know our Christine? Her good genius has sent her back to us. Good genius, that's what it is. Not mystical music man or whatever I said before." "Mamma!" the girl broke in promptly, while a deep blush mantled to her eyes. "I thought, mamma, that there was going to be no more question of that. You know there is no such thing as the angel of music." That's the name. Not good, well, good genius is what they refer to him as, but angel of music. Thank you, thank you, thank you. "But, child, he gave you lessons for 3 months." "Mamma, I have promised to explain everything to you one of these days, and I hope to do so. But you have promised me, until that day, to be silent, and to ask me no more questions whatever." "Provided that you promised never to leave me again. But you have promised that, Christine." "Mamma, all this cannot interest Monsieur de Chagny." "On the contrary, mademoiselle," said the young man, in a voice which he tried to make firm and brave, but which still trembled. "Anything that concerns you interests me to an extent which perhaps you will one day understand. I do not deny that my surprise equals my pleasure at finding you with your adopted mother, and that, after what happened between us yesterday, after what you said, and what I was able to guess, I hardly expected to see you here so soon. I should be the first to delight at your return, if you were not so bent on preserving a secrecy that may be fatal to you, and I have been your friend too long not to be alarmed, with Madame Valerius, at a disastrous adventure which will remain dangerous so long as we have not unravelled its threads, and of which you will certainly end by being the victim, Christine." At these words, Mamma Valerius tossed about her bed. "What does this mean?" she cried. "Is Christine in danger?" "Yes, madam," said Raoul courageously, notwithstanding the signs which Christine made to him. "My God!" exclaimed the good, simple old woman, gasping for breath. "You must tell me everything, Christine. Why did you not try to reassure me? And what danger is it?" "Monsieur, an impostor is abusing her good faith." "Is the angel of music an impostor?" "She told you herself that there is no angel of music." "But then what is it? In heaven's name! You will be the death of me." "There is a terrible mystery around us, madam, around you, around Christine. A mystery much more to be feared than any number of ghosts or genii." Mamma Valerius turned a terrified face to Christine, who had already run to her adopted mother, and was holding her in her arms. "Don't believe him, mummy, don't you believe him," she repeated. "Then tell me that you will never leave me again," implored the widow. Christine was silent, and Raoul resumed. "That is what you must promise, Christine. It is the only thing that can reassure your mother and me. We will undertake not to ask you a single question about the past, if you promise us to remain under our protection in future." "That is not an undertaking which I have not asked of you, and a promise which I refuse to make you," said the young girl haughtily. "I am mistress of my own actions, Monsieur de Chagny. You have no right to control them, and I will beg you to desist henceforth. As to what I have done during the last fortnight, there is only one man in the world who has the right to demand an account of me, my husband. Well, I have no husband, and I never mean to marry." You mean this absolute nonsense is actually nonsense? I am shocked. I bet Christine would take candy from strangers. Yes, absolutely she would. And she would go and, like, help find puppies. There is no puppy. There is no candy, Christine. No. She threw out her hands to emphasize her words, and Raoul turned pale. Not only because of the words which he had heard, but because he had caught her sight of a plain gold ring on Christine's finger. You have no husband, and yet you wear a wedding ring. He tried to seize her hand, but she swiftly drew it back. That's a present, she said, blushing once more and vainly striving to hide her embarrassment. Christine, you have no husband. That ring can only be Christine, as you have no husband, that ring can only have been given by one who hopes to make you his wife. Why deceive us further? Why torture me still more? That ring is a promise, and that promise has been accepted. That's what I said, exclaimed the old lady. And what did she answer, madam? What I chose, said Christine, driven by exasperation. Don't you think, monsieur, that this cross-examination has lasted long enough? As far as I'm concerned. Raoul was afraid to let her finish her speech. He interrupted her. I beg your pardon for speaking as I did, mademoiselle. You know the good intentions that make me meddle, just now, in matters which, you no doubt think, have nothing to do with me. But allow me to tell you what I have seen. And I have seen more than you suspect, Christine. Or what I thought I saw, for, to tell you the truth, I have sometimes been inclined to doubt the evidence of my eyes. Well, what did you see, sir? Or think you saw? I saw your ecstasy at the sound of the voice, Christine. The voice that came from the wall or the next room to yours. Yes, your ecstasy. And that is what makes me alarmed on your behalf. You are under a very dangerous spell. And yet it seems that you are aware of the imposture, because you say today that there is no angel of music. In that case, Christine, why did you follow him that time? Why did you stand up with radiant features as though you were really hearing angels? Ah, it is a dangerous voice, Christine, for I myself, when I heard it, was so much fascinated by it that you vanished before my eyes without my seeing which way you passed. Christine, Christine, in the name of heaven, in the name of your father who is in heaven now and who loved you so dearly and who loved me too, Christine, tell us, tell your benefactress and me, to whom does that voice belong? If you do, we will save you in spite of yourself. Come, Christine, the name of the man who had the audacity to put a ring on your finger. Monsieur de Chagny, the girl declared coldly, you shall never know. Thereupon, seeing the hostility with which her ward had addressed the Viscount, I know that it's not Viscount. We learned this. The Viscount. There we go. Mamma Valerius suddenly took Christine's part. And if she does love that man, Monsieur le Vicomte, even then it is no business of yours. Alas, madame, Raoul humbly replied, unable to restrain his tears. Alas, I believe that Christine really does love him. But it is not only that which drives me to despair, for what I am not certain of, madam, is that the man whom Christine loves is worthy of her love. It is for me to be the judge of that, monsieur, said Christine, looking Raoul angrily in the face. When a man, continued Raoul, adopts such romantic methods to entice a young girl's affections, the man must be either a villain or the girl a fool. Is that it? Christine! Raoul, why do you condemn a man whom you have never seen, whom no one knows, and about whom you yourself know nothing. Yes, Christine, yes. I at least know the name that you thought to keep from me forever. The name of your angel of music, mademoiselle, is Erik. Christine at once betrayed herself. She turned as white as a sheet and stammered, Who told you? You, yourself. How do you mean? By pitying him the other night, the night of the masked ball, when you went to your dressing room. Did you not say poor Erik? Well, Christine, there was a poor Raoul who overheard you. I have issues with Raoul. Gonna say it. I got my issues with him. This is the second time that you have listened behind my door, monsieur. I was not behind the door. I was in the dressing room, in the inner room, mademoiselle. Oh, unhappy man, moaned the girl, showing every sign of unspeakable terror. Unhappy man, do you want to be killed? Perhaps. Raoul muttered this perhaps with so much love and despair in his voice that Christine could not keep back a sob. She took his hands and looked at him with all the pure affection of which she was capable. Raoul, she said, forget the man's voice, and do not even remember its name. You must never try to fathom the mystery of the man's voice. Is the mystery so very terrible? There is no more awful mystery on the earth. Swear to me that you will make no attempt to find out, she insisted. Swear to me that you will never come to my dressing room unless I send for you. Then you promise to send for me sometime, Christine. I promise. When? Tomorrow. Then I swear to do as you ask. He kissed her hands and went away, cursing Erik and resolving to be patient. End of chapter 10. So, I got issues with Raoul. Exactly. Raoul is saving her from the Phantom, but who is going to save her from Raoul? So Christine says, like, there is no angel of music, but still being very mysterious about everything. And Raoul is like, okay, well then tell us who this is. And Christina's like, they're going back and forth, and Christina's like, you don't even know his name. And Raoul is like, yes, I do, because I'm a creep. His name is Erik. And she's like, oh, you were listening at my door again? And Erik is like, no, I was inside your dressing room. Duh. Which, what? And so Christine does take pity on Raoul. Nobody knows why. And is like, okay, well, just forget about him. Forget his voice. Forget his name. Like, just don't do anything until I call for you. And he's like, you're gonna call for me? And Christine is like, yeah. And he's like, when? And Christine is like, tomorrow. So I I'm not a fan. Yeah, exactly. Stalker much. I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Uh, and that's where we are with chapter 10. So, this is my first experience with Phantom of the Opera. I haven't seen anything, haven't read anything, not even like adaptations, I don't think. Without spoilers, are we supposed to be sympathetic to Raoul, or are these like you creep, you stalker type of reactions what we're supposed to feel? Like, is it like a time thing where like at the time that this was written, his love and devotion is supposed to be like, oh wow, he would do anything for Christine and that's just makes me swoon and whatever, or has it always been like super cringy and upsetting? I don't know. I don't know who we're supposed to root for. You think the version that you saw made him look better? Okay, gotcha. Stalker, creeper, cool. Yeah, he's a lot. He's a lot to handle. Hmm. Okay. Chapter 11. Above the trapped doors. The next day, he saw her at the opera. She was still wearing the plain gold ring. She was gentle and kind to him. She talked to him of the plans which he was forming, of his future, of his career. He told her that the date of the polar expedition had been put forward, and that he would leave France in 3 weeks, or a month at latest. She suggested, almost happily, that he must look upon the voyage with delight, as a stage toward his coming fame. And when he replied that fame without love was no attraction in his eyes, she treated him as a child whose sorrows were only short-lived. "How can you speak so lightly of such serious things?" he said. "Perhaps we shall never see each other again. I may die during that expedition." "Or I," she said simply. She no longer smiled or jested. She seemed to be thinking of some new thing that had entered her mind for the first time. Her eyes were all aglow with it. "What are you thinking of, Christine?" "I am thinking that we shall not see each other again." "And does that make you so radiant?" "And that, in a month, we shall have to say goodbye for forever." "Unless, Christine, we pledge our faith and wait for each other forever." He put her hand on his mouth. What? He. Oh. She put her hand on his mouth. Okay, the way I read it, I was imagining him grabbing her hand and just like putting it on his mouth, and I was like, I don't like this. But she put her hand on his mouth, probably to like shush him, right? Oh yeah, if I literally just kept reading. "Hush, Raoul. You know there is no question of that. And we shall never be married. That is understood." She seemed suddenly almost unable to contain an overpowering gaiety. She clapped her hands with childish glee. Raoul stared at her in amazement. But, she continued, holding out her two hands to Raoul, or rather giving them to him, as though she had suddenly resolved to make him a present of them. "But if we cannot be married, we can—we can be engaged. Nobody will know but ourselves, Raoul. There will be plenty of secret marriages. Why not a secret engagement? We are engaged, dear, for a month. In a month you will go away, and I can be happy at the thought of of that month all my life long." She was enchanted with her inspiration. Then she became serious again. "This," she said, "is a happiness that will harm no one." Raoul jumped at the idea. He bowed to Christine and said, "Mademoiselle, I have the honor to ask for your hand." "Why, you have both of them already, my dear betrothed. Oh, Raoul, how happy we shall be! We must play at being engaged all day long." It was the prettiest game in the world, and they enjoyed it like the children that they were. Oh, the wonderful speeches they made to each other, and the eternal vows they exchanged. They played at hearts as other children might play at ball. Only, as it was really their two hearts that they flung to and fro, they had to be very, very handy to catch them each time without hurting them. One day, about a week after the game began, Raoul's heart was badly hurt, and he stopped playing and uttered these wild words: "I shan't go to the North Pole." Christine, who, in her innocence, had not dreamed of such a possibility, suddenly discovered the danger of the game, and reproached herself bitterly. She did not say a word in reply to Raoul's remark, and went straight home. This happened in the afternoon, in the singers' dressing-room, where they met every day, and where they amused themselves by dining on 3 biscuits, 2 glasses of port, and a bunch of violets. In the evening she did not sing, and he did not receive his usual letter, though they had arranged to write to each other daily during that month. The next morning he ran off to Mamma Valerius, who told him that Christine had gone away for 2 days. She had left at 5 o'clock the day before. Raoul was distracted. He hated Mamma Valerius for giving him such news as that was with such stupefying calmness. He tried to sound her, but the old lady obviously knew something. Christine returned on the triumph on what? Christine returned on the following day. She returned in triumph. She renewed her extraordinary success of the gala performance. Since the adventure of the toad, Carlotta had not been able to appear on stage. The toad is Carlotta's voice coming out as like a toad. Carlotta was is the lead and to Christine's understudy. The terror of a fresh goack filled her heart and deprived her of all her power of singing, and the theater that had witnessed her incomprehensible disgrace had become odious to her. She contrived to cancel her contract. Daaé was offered the vacant place for the time. She received thunders of applause in the Juvie. The Viscount, who, of course, was present, was the only one to suffer on hearing the thousand echoes of this fresh triumph, for Christine still wore her plain gold ring. A distant voice whispered in the young man's ear, "She is wearing the ring again tonight, and you did not give it to her. She gave her soul again tonight, and did not give it to you. If she will not tell you what she has been doing the past 2 days, you must go and ask Erik." He ran behind the scene and placed himself in her way. She saw him, for her eyes were looking for him. She said, "Quick, quick, come," and she dragged him to her dressing room. Raoul at once threw himself on his knees before her. He swore to her that he would go, and he entreated her never again to withhold a single hour of the ideal happiness which she had promised him. She let her tears flow. They kissed like a despairing brother and sister who had been smitten with a common loss and who meet to mourn a dead parent. What? What does that mean? They kissed like a despairing brother and sister who have been smitten with a common loss and who meet to mourn a dead parent. What? I don't know what that kiss means. I don't I don't know. Okay, we'll try to move on from that. Awkward indeed. Oh my god. Okay. Suddenly, she snatched herself from the young man's soft and timid embrace, seemed to listen to something, and, with a quick gesture, pointed to the door. When he was on the threshold, she said in a low voice, in so low a voice that the Viscount guessed rather than heard her words, "Tomorrow, my dear betrothed, and be happy, Raoul. I sang for you tonight." He returned the next day, but those 2 days of absence had broken the charm of their delightful make-believe. They looked at each other, in the dressing room, with their sad eyes, without exchanging a word. Raoul had to restrain himself not to cry out, "I am jealous! I am jealous! I am jealous!" Yeah, we know. But she heard him all the same. Then she said, "Come for a walk, dear. The air will do you good." Raoul thought that she would propose a stroll in the country, far from that building which he detested as the prison, whose jailer he could feel walking within the walls, the jailer Erik. But she took him to the stage and made him sit on a wooden curb of a well, in the doubtful peace and coolness of a first scene set for the evening's performance. On another day, she wandered with him, hand in hand, along the deserted paths of a garden whose creepers had been cut out by a decorator's skillful hands. It was as though the real sky, the real flowers, the real earth were forbidden her for all time, and she condemned to breathe no other air than that of the theater. An occasional fireman passed, watching over their melancholy idyll from afar, and she would drag him up above the clouds, in the magnificent disorder of the grid, where she loved to make him giddy by running in front of him along the frail bridges, among the thousands of ropes fastened to the pulleys, the windlasses, the rollers, in the midst of a regular forest of yards and masts. If he hesitated, she said, with an adorable pout of her lips, "You, a sailor." I don't understand that. If he hesitated, she just says you, I don't understand. I don't understand the kissing like brothers, or brother and sister coming together after like a parent's death. I don't understand that. And I don't understand being like, "Oh, you a sailor," if he's like distracted or slow. I don't understand. I don't get it. Too much kissing. Far too much. And then they returned to terra firma, that is to say, to some passage that led them to the little girls' dancing school, where brats between 6 and 10 were practicing their steps, in the hope of becoming great dancers one day, covered with diamonds. Meanwhile, Christine gave them sweets instead. She took him to the wardrobe and property rooms, took him all over her empire, which was artificial, but immense, covering 17 stories from the ground floor to the roof, and inhabited by an army of subjects. She moved among them like a popular queen, encouraging them in their labors, sitting down in the workshops, giving words of advice to the workmen whose hands hesitated to cut into the rich stuffs that were to clothe heroes. There were inhabitants of that country who practiced every trade. There were cobblers, there were goldsmiths. All had learned to know her and to love her, for she always interested herself in all their troubles and all their little hobbies. She knew unsuspected corners that were secretly occupied by little old couples. She knocked at their door and introduced Raoul to them as a Prince Charming who had asked for her hand, and 2 of them, sitting on some worm-eaten property, would listen to the legends of the opera, even as, in their childhood, they had listened to the old Breton tales. Those old people remembered nothing outside the opera. They had lived there for years without number. Past managements had forgotten them. Palace revolutions had taken no notice of them. The history of France had run its course unknown to them, and nobody recollected their existence. The precious days sped in this way, and Raoul and Christine, by affecting excessive interest in outside matters, strove awkwardly to hide from each other the one thought of their hearts. One fact was certain, that Christine, who until then had shown herself the stronger of the 2, became suddenly inexpressibly nervous. When on their expeditions, she would start running, without reason, or else suddenly stop, and her hand, turning ice cold in a moment, would hold the young man back. Sometimes her eyes seemed to pursue imaginary shadows. She cried, "This way," and "This way," and "This way," laughing a breathless laugh that often ended in tears. Then Raoul tried to speak, to question her, in spite of his promises. But, even before he had worded his question, she answered, feverishly, "Nothing. I swear it's nothing." Once, when they were passing before an open trapdoor on the stage, Raoul stopped over the dark cavity. "You have shown me over the upper part of your empire, Christine, but there are strange stories told of the lower part. Shall we go down?" She caught him in her arms, as though she feared to see him disappear down the black hole, and in a trembling voice whispered, "Never. I will not have you go down there. Besides, it's not mine. Everything that is underground belongs to him." Raoul looked her in the eyes and said roughly, "So he lives down there, does he?" "I never said so. Who told you a thing like that? Come away. I sometimes wonder if you are quite sane, Raoul. You always take things in such an impossible way. Come along. Come on." And she literally dragged him away, for he was obstinate and wanted to remain by the trapdoor. That hole attracted him. Suddenly, the trapdoor was closed, and so quickly that they did not even see the hand that worked it, and they remained quite dazed. "Perhaps he was there," Raoul said at last. She shrugged her shoulders, but did not seem easy. "No, no, it was the trapdoor shutters. They must do something, you know. They open and shut the trapdoors without any particular reason. It's like the door shutters. They must spend their time somehow." "But suppose it were he, Christine?" "No, no, he has shut himself up. He is working." "Oh, really? He is working, is he?" "Yes. He can't open and shut the trapdoors and work at the same time." She shivered. "What is he working at?" "Oh, something terrible. But it's all the better for us. When he's working at that, he sees nothing. He does not eat, drink, or breathe for days and nights at a time. He becomes a living dead man and has no time to amuse himself with the trapdoors." She shivered again. She was still holding him in her arms. Then she sighed and said in her turn, "Suppose it were he." "Are you afraid of him?" "No, of course not," she said. For all that, on the next day, and the following days, Christine was careful to avoid the trapdoors. Her agitation only increased as the hours passed. At last, one afternoon, she arrived very late, with her face so desperately pale, and her eyes so desperately red, that Raoul resolved to go to all lengths, including that which he foreshadowed when he blurted out that he would not go to the North Pole expedition unless she first told him the secret of the man's voice. "Hush, hush, in heaven's name! Suppose he heard you, you unfortunate Raoul!" And Christine's eyes stared wildly at everything around her. "I will remove you from his power, Christine, I swear it, and you shall not think of him any more." "Is it possible?" She allowed herself this doubt, which was an encouragement, while dragging the young man up to the topmost floor of the theater, far, very far from the trapdoors. "I shall hide you in some unknown corner of the world, where he cannot come look for you. You will be safe, and then I shall go away, as you have sworn never to marry." Christine seized Raoul's hands and squeezed them with incredible rapture. But, suddenly becoming alarmed again, she turned away her head. "Higher," was all she said, "higher still," and she dragged him up toward the summit. He had a difficulty in following her. They were soon under the very roof in the maze of timber work. They slipped through the buttresses, the rafters, the joists. They ran from beam to beam as they might have run from tree to tree in a forest. And, despite the care which she took to look behind her at every moment, she failed to see a shadow which followed her like her own shadow, which stopped when she stopped, which started again when she did, and which made no more noise than a well-conducted shadow should. As for Raoul, he saw nothing either, for, when he had Christine in front of him, nothing interested him that happened behind. End of chapter 11. All right, so a weird chapter. So they're walking around, and Raoul has to leave in a couple weeks, maybe a month, for uh to the North Pole, to France. I don't know. He's leaving. And he is just so sad because he might never see Christine again. He's like, well, what if I die? And she's like, well, I might die. And then Raoul is like, man, I need you to be mine and only mine. And Christine is like, well, what if we pretended to be engaged? Like, people have secret marriages all the time. What about a secret engagement? Which is silly. Christine, what? So they have a secret engagement, which is like pretend, and they're just like pretending to be engaged. I don't know. They write letters to each other. They're like being cute to each other. I don't know. Um, but the Erik, the opera ghost, the angel of music, is still lingering in the background, and his presence is still around. And Raoul is getting more and more frustrated about it, which, sure, but it's just he's being so possessive. So possessive. Clinging much, Raoul? Can we get a restraining order for Christine, please? Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. It's a lot. I just it's too much. Ugh. Oof. Raoul, I know. He needs to calm down, Raoul does. It's too much. Christine is not yours. You do not own people. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. Christine can do what she wants. And you are being a bit much. All right. Chapter 12. Apollo's Lyre. 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 Oh, it's a long one. All right. Everybody get comfy cozy. It's a long chapter. Okay. I will be stopping to take sit breaks. FYI. In this way, they reached the roof. Christine tripped over it as lightly as a swallow. Their eyes swept the empty space between the three domes and the triangular pediment. She breathed freely over Paris, the whole valley of which was seen at work below. She called Raoul to come quite close to her, and they walked side by side among the zinc streets in the leaden avenues. They looked at their own twin shapes in the huge tanks full of stagnant water, where, in the hot weather, the little boys of the ballet, a score or so, learned to swim and dive. Who wants Christine anyway? She's crazy. Well, I guess so is Raoul. Raoul, crazy in different ways. Does that mean that they're good for each other? No. Let's see. The shadow had followed behind them, clinging to their steps, and the two children little suspected its presence when they at last sat down, trustingly, under the mighty protection of Apollo, who, with a great bronze gesture, lifted his huge lyre to the heart of a crimson sky. It was a gorgeous spring evening. Clouds, which had just received their gossamer robe of gold and purple from the setting sun, drifted slowly by, and Christine said to Raoul, soon we shall go farther and faster than the clouds, to the end of the world, and then you will leave me, Raoul. But if, when the moment comes for you to take me away, I refuse to go with you, well, you must carry me off by force. Are you afraid that you will change your mind, Christine? I don't know, she said, shaking her head in an odd fashion. He is a demon. And she shivered and nestled in his arms with a moan. I'm afraid now of going back to live with him, in the ground. What compels you to go back, Christine? If I do not go back to him, terrible misfortunes may happen. But I can't do it. I can't do it. I know one ought to be sorry for people who live underground, but he is too horrible. And yet the time is at hand. I have only a day left, and if I do not go, he will come and fetch me with his voice, and he will drag me with him underground, and go on his knees before me with his death's head. And he will tell me that he loves me, and he will cry, oh, those tears, Raoul, those tears in the two black eye sockets of the death's head. I cannot see those tears flow again. She wrung her hands in anguish, while Raoul pressed her to his heart. No, no, you shall never again hear him tell you that he loves you. You shall not see his tears. Let us fly, Christine. Let us fly at once. And he tried to drag her away, then and there, but she stopped him. No, no, she said, shaking her head sadly, not now. It would be too cruel to let him hear me sing tomorrow evening. And then we will go away. You must come and fetch me in my dressing room at midnight exactly. He will then be waiting for me in the dining room by the lake. We shall be free, and you shall take me away. You must promise me that, Raoul, even if I refuse, for I feel that, if I go back this time, I shall perhaps never return. Christine, you got yourself in quite the situation, huh? Between a rock and a hard place. And she gave a sigh, to which it seemed to her that another sigh behind her replied. Didn't you hear? Her teeth clattered. No, said Raoul. I heard nothing. It is too terrible, she confessed, to be always trembling like this, and yet we run no danger here. We are at home, in the sky, in the open air, in the light. The sun is flaming, and night birds cannot bear to look at the sun. I have never seen him in daylight. It must be awful. Oh, the first time I saw him, I thought he was going to die. Why? Asked Raoul, really frightened at the aspect which this strange confidence was taken. Because I had seen him. This time, Raoul and Christine turned round at the same time. There is someone in pain, said Raoul. Perhaps someone has been hurt. Did you hear? I can't say, Christine confessed. Even when he is not there, my ears are full of his sighs. Still, if you heard... They stood up and looked around them. They were quite alone on the immense lead on the immense lead roof. They sat down again, and Raoul said, Tell me how you first saw him. I had heard him for 3 months without seeing him. The first time I heard it, I thought, as you did, that adorable voice was singing in another room. I went out and looked everywhere, but as you know, Raoul, my dressing room is very much by itself, and I could not find the voice outside my room, whereas it went on steadily inside. That was almost like a Midwest nice thing. Like, as you know, Raoul, my dressing room is alone. You know this because you've been in there, creeping, unannounced, and hiding, Raoul. And it only sang. Oh wait, hold on. Dressing room is very much by itself, and I could not find the voice outside my room, whereas it went on steadily inside. And it not only sang, but it spoke to me, and answered my questions like a real man's voice, with this difference, and it was as beautiful as the voice of an angel. I had never got the angel of music whom my poor father had promised to send me as soon as he was dead. I really think that Mamma Valerius was a little bit to blame. I told her about it, and she at once said, It must be the angel. At any rate, you can do no harm by asking him. I did so, and the man's voice replied that yes, it was the angel's voice, the voice which I was expecting and which my father had promised me. From that time onward, the voice and I became great friends. It asked leave to give me lessons every day. I agreed, and never failed to keep the appointment which it gave me in my dressing room. You have no idea, though you have heard the voice, of what those lessons were like. I have no idea, said Raoul. What was your accompaniment? We were accompanied by a music which I do not know. It was behind the wall and wonderfully accurate. The voice seemed to understand mine exactly, to know precisely where my father had left off teaching me. In a few weeks' time I hardly knew myself when I sang. I was even frightened. I seemed to dread a sort of witchcraft behind it. But Mamma Valerius reassured me. She said that she knew I was much too simple a girl to have the devil hold on me. That's not very nice. You are too simple for the devil to want you. What? Mama Valerius, be nice. My progress, by the voice's own order, was kept a secret between the voice, Mamma Valerius, and myself. It was a curious thing, but outside the dressing room I sang with my ordinary, everyday voice, and nobody noticed anything. I did all that the voice asked. It said, "Wait and see, we shall astonish Paris." And I waited, and lived on in a sort of ecstatic dream. It was then that I saw you for the first time one evening in the house. I was so glad that I never thought of concealing my delight when I reached my dressing room. Unfortunately, the voice was there before me and soon noticed, by my air, that something had happened. It asked what was the matter, and I saw no reason for keeping our story secret, or concealing the place which you filled in my heart. Then the voice was silent. I called to it, but it did not reply. I begged and entreated, but in vain. I was terrified lest it had gone for good. I wished to heaven it had. That night I went home in a desperate condition. I told Mamma Valerius, who said, "Why, of course the voice is jealous." And that, dear, first revealed to me that I loved you. What? Christine, girl, come on. Christine stopped and laid her head on Raoul's shoulder. They sat like that for a moment, in silence, and they did not perceive the movement, at a few steps from them, of the creeping shadow of two black wings, a shadow that came along the roof so near them, that it could have stifled them by closing over them. The next day, Christine continued with a sigh, I went back to my dressing room in a very pensive frame of mind. The voice was there, spoke to me with great sadness, and told me plainly that, if I must bestow my heart on earth, there was nothing for the voice to do but to go back to heaven. And it said this with such an accent of human sorrow that I ought then and there to have suspected and begun to believe that I was the victim of my deluded senses. But my faith in the voice, with which the memory of my father was so closely intermingled, remained undisturbed. I feared nothing so much as that I might never hear it again. I had thought about my love for you, and realized all the useless danger of it, and I did not even know if you remembered me. Whatever happened, your position in society forbade me to contemplate the possibility of ever marrying you. And I swore to the voice that you were no more than a brother to me, nor ever would be, and that my heart was incapable of any earthly love. And that, dear, was why I refused to recognize you or see you when I met you on the stage or in the passages. Meanwhile, the hours during which the voice taught me were spent in a divine frenzy, until, at last, the voice said to me, "You can now, Christine, give to men a little of the music of heaven." I do not know how it was that Carlotta did not come to the theatre that night, nor why I was called upon to sing in her stead, but I sang with a rapture I had never known before, and I felt for a moment as if my soul were leaving my body. "Oh, Christine," said Raoul, "my heart quivered that night at every accent of your voice. I saw the tears stream down your cheeks, and I wept with you. How could you sing like that while crying?" "I felt myself fainting," said Christine. "I closed my eyes. When I opened them, you were by my side. But the voice was there also, Raoul. I was afraid for your sake, and again I would not recognize you, and began to laugh when you reminded me that you had picked up my scarf in the sea. Alas, there's no deceiving the voice. The voice recognized you, and the voice was jealous. It said that, if I did not love you, I would not avoid you, but treat you like any other old friend. It made me scene upon scene. At last I said to the voice, "That will do. I am going to Paris tomorrow to pray on my father's grave, and I shall ask Monsieur Raoul de Chagny to go with me." "Do as you please," replied the voice, "but I shall be at Paris too, for I am wherever you are, Christine. And, if you are still worthy of me, if you have not lied to me, I will play you the resurrection of Lazarus, on the stroke of midnight, on your father's tomb and on your father's violin. That, dear, was how I came to write you the letter that brought you to Paris. How could I have been so beguiled? How was it, when I saw the personal, the selfish point of view of the voice, that I did not suspect some impostor? Alas, I was no longer mistress of myself. I had become this thing. "But, after all," cried Raoul, "you soon came to know the truth. Why did you not at once rid yourself of that abominable nightmare?" "Know the truth, Raoul? Rid myself of that nightmare? But, my poor boy, I was not caught in the nightmare until the day when I learned the truth. Pity me, Raoul, pity me. You remember the terrible evening when Carlotta thought that she had been turned into a toad on the stage, and when the house was suddenly plunged into darkness through the chandelier crashing to the floor? There were killed and wounded that night, and the whole theatre rang with terrified screams. My first thought was for you and the voice. I was at once easy, where you were concerned, for I had seen you in your brother's box, and I knew that you were not in danger. But the voice had told me that it would be at the performance that I was really afraid for it, just as if it had been an ordinary person who was capable of dying. I thought to myself, the chandelier may have come down upon the voice. I was then on the stage, and was nearly running into the house to look for the voice among the killed and wounded, when I thought that, if the voice was safe, it would be sure to be in my dressing room, and I rushed to my room. The voice was not there. I locked my door, and, with tears in my eyes, besought it, if it were still alive, to manifest itself to me. The voice did not reply, but suddenly I heard a long, beautiful wail which I knew well. It is the plaint of Lazarus when, at the sound of the Redeemer's voice, he begins to open his eyes and see the light of day. It was the music which you and I, Raoul, heard at Paros. And then the voice began to sing the leading phrase, "Come and believe in me. Whoso believes in me shall live. Walk. Whoso hath believed in me shall never die." I cannot tell you the effect which that music had upon me. It seemed to command me, personally, to come, to stand up, and to come to it. It retreated, and I followed. "Come and believe in me." I believed in it. I came, and this was the extraordinary thing. My dressing room, as I moved, seemed to lengthen out. To lengthen out. Evidently it must have been an effect of mirrors, for I had the mirror in front of me. And, suddenly, I was outside the room, without knowing how. What? Without knowing how? Christine! Christine, you must really stop dreaming. Okay, Raoul, how can you say that? Because you saw weirdness when you were hiding, so... Excuse me. Excuse me. I was not dreaming, dear. I was outside my room without knowing how. You, who saw me disappear from my room one evening, may be able to explain it. But I cannot. I can only tell you that, suddenly, there was no mirror before me, and no dressing room. I was in a dark passage. I was frightened, and I cried out. It was quite dark, but for a faint, red glimmer in a distant corner of the wall. I cried out. My voice was the only sound, for the singing and the violin had stopped, and, suddenly, a hand was laid on mine, or rather a stone-cold, bony thing that seized my wrist and did not let go. I cried out again. An arm took me round the waist and supported me. I struggled for a little while and then gave up the attempt. I was dragged toward the little red light, and then I saw that I was in the hands of a man wrapped in a large cloak and wearing a mask that hid his whole face. I made one last effort. My limbs stiffened, my mouth opened to scream, but a hand closed, a hand which I felt on my lips, on my skin, a hand that smelt of death. Then I fainted away. This whole story is actually a fever dream. When I opened my eyes, we were still surrounded by darkness. A lantern standing on the ground showed a bubbling well. The water splashing from the well disappeared almost at once under the floor on which I was lying, with my head on the knee of the man in the black cloak and the black mask. He was bathing my temples, and his hands smelt of death. Not moist, but smelt of death. So we have Raoul's moist hand, or Erik's death-smelling hand. I tried to push them away, and asked, "Who are you? Where is the voice?" His only answer was a sigh. Suddenly, a hot breath passed over my face, and I perceived a white shape beside the man's black shape in the darkness. The black shape lifted me onto the white shape. A glad neighing greeted my astonished ears, and I murmured, "Cesar." The animal quivered. That's right. Cesar is a horse that went missing. That's a callback. The animal quivered. Raoul, I was lying, standing on the ground. I was lying, half back on a saddle, and I recognized the white horse out of Profeta, which I had so often fed with sugar and sweets. I remembered that, one evening, there was a rumor in the theater that the horse had disappeared and that it had been stolen by the opera ghost. I believed in the voice, but had never believed in the ghost. Now, however, I began to wonder, with a shiver, whether I was the ghost's prisoner. I called upon the voice to help me, for I should never have imagined that the voice and the ghost were one. You have heard about the opera ghost, have you not, Raoul? Yes, but tell me what happened when you were on the white horse of the Profeta. I made no movement, and let myself go. The black shape held me up, and I made no effort to escape. A curious feeling of peacefulness came over me, and I thought that I must be under the influence of some cordial. I had the full command of my senses, and my eyes became used to the darkness, which was lit, here and there, by fitful gleams. I'd calculated that we were in a narrow, circular gallery, probably running all around the opera, which is immense, underground. I had once been down into these cellars, but had stopped at the third floor, though there were two lower still, large enough to hold a town. But the figures of which I caught sight had made me run away. There are demons down there, quite black, standing in front of boilers, and they wield shovels and pitchforks and poke up fires and stir up flames, and if you come too near them, they frighten you by suddenly opening the red mouths of their furnaces. Well, while Cesar was quietly carrying me on his back, I saw those black demons in the distance, looking quite small, in front of the red fires of their furnaces. They came into sight, disappeared, and came into sight again as we went on our winding way. At last they disappeared altogether. The shape was still holding me up, and Cesar walked on, unled and sure-footed. I could not tell you, even approximately, how long this ride lasted. I only know that we seemed to turn, and often went down a spiral stair into the very heart of the earth. Even then, it may be that my head was turning, but I don't think so. No, my mind was quite clear. At last, Cesar raised his nostrils, sniffed the air, and quickened his pace a little. I felt a moistness in the air, and Cesar stopped. The darkness had lifted. A sort of bluey light surrounded us. We were on the edge of a lake whose leaden waters stretched into the distance, into the darkness. But the blue light lit up the bank, and I saw a little boat fastened to an iron ring on the wharf. A boat? Yes, but I knew that all that existed, and that there was nothing supernatural about that underground lake and boat. But think of the exceptional conditions in which I arrived upon that shore. I don't know whether the effects of the cordial had worn off when the man's shape lifted me into the boat, but my terror began all over again. My gruesome escort must have noticed it, for he sent Cesar back, and I heard his hoofs trampling up a staircase while the man jumped into the boat, untied the rope that held it, and seized the oars. He rowed with a quick, powerful stroke, and his eyes, under the mask, never left me. We slipped across the noiseless water in the bluey light which I told you of. Then we were in the dark again, and we touched shore. And I was once more taken up in the man's arms. I cried aloud. And then, suddenly, I was silent, dazed by the light. Yes, a dazzling light in the midst of which I had been put down. I sprang to my feet. I was in the middle of a drawing-room that seemed to me to be decorated, adorned, and furnished with nothing but flowers, both magnificent and stupid, because of the silk ribbons that tied them to baskets, like those which they sell in the shops on the boulevards. They were much too civilized flowers, like those which I used to find in my dressing-room after a first night. And in the midst of all these flowers stood the black shape of the man in the mask, with arms crossed, and he said, "Don't be afraid, Christine. You are in no danger." It was the voice. My anger equaled my amazement. I rushed at the mask and tried to snatch it away, so as to see the face of the voice. The man said, "You are in no danger, as long as you do not touch the mask." And, taking me gently by the wrists, he forced me into a chair and then went down on his knees before me and said nothing more. His humility gave me back some of my courage, and the light restored me to the realities of life, however extraordinary the adventure might be. I was now surrounded by mortal, visible, tangible things. The furniture, the hangings, the candles, the vases, and the very flowers in their baskets, of which I could almost have told whence they came and what they cost, were bound to confine my imagination to the limits of a drawing-room quite as commonplace as any that, at least, had the excuse of not being in the cellars of the opera. I had no doubt to do with a terrible, eccentric person who, in some mysterious fashion, had succeeded in taking up his abode there, under the opera house, 5 stories below the level of the ground. And the voice which I had recognized under the mask, was on its knees before me, was a man, and I began to cry. The man, still kneeling, must have understood the cause of my tears, for he said, "It is true, Christine, I am not an angel, nor a genius, nor a ghost. I am Erik." What? Christine's narrative was again interrupted. An echo behind them seemed to repeat the word after her. Erik. What echo? They both turned round and saw that night had fallen. Raoul made a movement as though to rise, but Christine kept him beside her. "Don't go," she said. "I want you to know everything here." "But why here, Christine? I'm afraid of your catching cold." "We have nothing to fear, except the trapdoors, dear. And here we are miles away from the trapdoors, and I am not allowed to see you outside the theater. This is not the time to annoy him. We must not arouse his suspicion." Christine, something tells me that we are wrong to wait till tomorrow evening, and that we ought to fly at once." "I tell you that, if he does not hear me sing tomorrow, it will cause him infinite pain." "It is difficult not to cause him pain, and yet to escape from him for good." "You are right in that, Raoul, for certainly he will die of my flight." And she added in a dull voice, "But then it counts both ways, for we risk his killing us. Does he love you so much? He would commit murder for me. But one can find out where he lives. One can go in search of him. Now that we know that Erik is not a ghost, one can speak to him and force him to answer. Christine shook her head. No, there is nothing to be done with Erik, except to run away. Then why? When you were able to run away, did you go back to him? Because I had to. And you will understand that when I tell you how I left him. Oh, I hate him, cried Raoul. And you, Christine, tell me, do you hate him too? No, said Christine simply. No, of course not. Why, you love him. Your fear, your terror, all of that is just love, and love of the most exquisite kind, the kind which people do not admit even to themselves, said Raoul bitterly. The kind that gives you a thrill when you think of it. Picture it, a man who lives in a palace underground. And he gave a leer. Infinite pain. Can I get a second opinion on that, please? Thank you. Then you want me to go back there? Said the young girl cruelly. Take care, Raoul. I have told you, I should never return. There was an appalling silence between the three of them, the two who spoke, and the shadow that listened behind them. Before answering that, said Raoul at last, speaking very slowly, I should like to know with what feeling he inspires you, since you do not hate him. With horror, she said. That is the terrible thing about it. He fills me with horror, and I do not hate him. How can I hate him, Raoul? Think of Erik at my feet, in the house on the lake underground. He accuses himself. He curses himself. He implores my forgiveness. He confesses his cheat. He loves me. He lays at my feet in immense and tragic love. He has carried me off for love. He has imprisoned me with him underground for love. But he respects me. He crawls, he moans, he weeps. And when I stood up, Raoul, and told him that I could only despise him if he did not, then and there, give me liberty, he offered it. He offered to show me the mysterious road, only he rose too. And I was made to remember that, although he was not an angel, nor a ghost, nor a genius, he remained a voice, for he sang. And I listened and stayed. That night we did not exchange another word. He sang me to sleep. When I woke up, I was alone, lying on a sofa in a simple, furnished little bedroom, with an ordinary mahogany bedstead, lit by a lamp standing on the marble top of an old Louis Philippe chest of drawers. I soon discovered that I was a prisoner, and that the only outlet from my room led to a very comfortable bathroom. On returning to the bathroom, I saw on the chest of drawers a note, in red ink, which said, My dear Christine, you need not concern as to your fate. You have no better nor more respectful friend in the world than myself. You are alone at present, in this home which is yours. I am going out shopping to fetch you all the things that you need. I felt sure that I had fallen into the hands of a madman. I ran round my little apartment, looking for a way to escape, which I could not find. I upbraided myself for my absurd superstition, which had caused me to fall into the trap. I felt inclined to laugh and to cry at the same time. This was the state of mind in which Erik found me. After giving 3 taps on the wall, he walked in quietly through a door which I had not noticed, and which he left open. He had his arms full of boxes and parcels and arranged them on the bed in a leisurely fashion, while I overwhelmed him with abuse and called upon him to take off his mask if it covered the face of an honest man. He replied serenely, You shall never see Erik's face. And okay, can we not talk in third person, Erik? That would be great. Not only are you already creepy, but then you gotta talk in third person? Why? Why must that be an attribute that you have? Stop it. and he reproached me with not having finished dressing at the time of day. He was good enough to tell me that it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He said he would give me half an hour and, while he spoke, wound up my watch and set it for me. After which he asked me to come to the dining room where a nice lunch was waiting for us. I was very hungry. Oh no, I wasn't. I mentioned lunch and every word just turns to hungry. It's definitely I was very angry. Girl, I know you're living in less civilized times, but imprisoning someone is not a sign of respect. Do we need to have a sit down? It seems like it. Girl, come on. I was very angry, slammed the door in his face, and went to the bathroom. When I came out again, feeling greatly refreshed, Erik said that he loved me, but that he would never tell me so except when I allowed him, and that the rest of the time would be devoted to music. What do you mean by the rest of the time? I asked. 5 days, he said, with decision. I asked him if I should then be free, and he said, "You will be free, Christine, for when those 5 days are past, you will have learned not to see me. And then, from time to time, you will come to see your poor Erik." He pointed to a chair opposite him at a small table, and I sat down, feeling greatly perturbed. However, I ate a few prawns and the wing of a chicken, and drank half a glass of Tokay, which he had himself, he told me, brought from the Königsberg cellars. Erik did not eat or drink. I asked him what his nationality was, and if that name of Erik did not point to his Scandinavian origin. He said that he had no name and no country, and that he had taken the name of Erik by accident. After lunch he rose and gave me the tips of his fingers, saying he would like to show me over his flat. But I snatched away my hand and gave a cry. What I had touched was cold and, at the same time, bony, and I remembered that his hands smelt of death. "Oh, forgive me," he moaned, and he opened a door before me. "This is my bedroom, if you care to see it. It is rather curious." His manners, his words, his attitude gave me confidence, and I went in without hesitation. I felt as if I were entering the room of a dead person. The walls were all hung with black. But instead of the white trimmings that usually set off that funereal upholstery, there was an enormous stave of music with the notes of the Daaé's ire many times repeated. In the middle of the room was a canopy from which hung curtains of red brocaded stuff, and, under the canopy, an open coffin. "This is where I sleep," said Erik. "One has to get used to everything in life, even to eternity." The sight upset me so much that I turned away my head. Then I saw the keyboard of an organ, which filled one's whole side of the walls. On the desk was a music book covered with red notes. I asked leave to look at it, and read Don Juan Triumphant. "Yes," he said, "I compose sometimes. I began that work 20 years ago. When I have finished, I shall take it away with me in that coffin, and never wake up again." "You must work at it as seldom as you can," I said. He replied, "I sometimes work at it for 14 days and nights together, during which I live on music alone, and then I rest for years at a time." "Will you play me something out of your Don Juan Triumphant?" I asked, thinking to please him. "You must never ask me that," he said in a gloomy voice. "I will play you Mozart, if you like, which will only make you weep. But my Don Juan, Christine, burns, and yet he is not struck by fire from heaven." Thereupon we returned to the drawing-room. I noticed that there was no mirror in the whole apartment. I was going to remark upon this, but Erik had already sat down to the piano. He said, "You see, Christine, there is some music that is so terrible that it consumes all who approach it. Fortunately, you have not come to that music yet, for you would lose all your pretty coloring, and nobody would know you when you returned to Paris. Let us sing something from the opera, Christine." He spoke these last words as though he were flinging an insult at me. "What did you do?" I had no time to think about the meaning he put into those words. We at once began the duet in Othello, and already the catastrophe was upon us. I sang Desdemona with a despair, a terror which I had never displayed before. As for him, his voice thundered forth his revengeful soul at every note. Love, jealousy, hatred burst out around us in harrowing cries. Eric's black mask made me think of the natural mask of the Moor of Venice. He was Othello himself. Suddenly, I felt a need to see beneath the mask. I wanted to know the face of the voice, and, with a movement which I was utterly unable to control, swiftly my fingers tore away the mask. Oh, horror! 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 Christine stopped. At the thought of the vision that had scared her, while the echoes of the night, which had repeated the name of Erik, now thrice moaned the cry. Horror! 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 Raoul and Christine, clasping each other closely, raised their eyes to the stars that shone in a clear and peaceful sky. Raoul said, "Strange, Christine, that this calm, soft night should be so full of plaintive sounds. One would think that it was sorrowing with us." "When you know the secret, Raoul, your ears, like mine, will be full of lamentations." She took Raoul's protecting hands in hers and, with a long shiver, continued. "Yes, I have lived to be 100. I should always hear the superhuman cry of grief and rage which he uttered when the terrible sights appeared before my eyes. Raoul, you have seen death's hands when you have been dried and withered by the centuries, and perhaps, if you were not the victim of a nightmare, you saw his hands at Paros. And then you saw Red Death stalking about at the last masked ball. But all those death's heads were motionless, and their dumb horror was not alive. But imagine, if you can, Red Death's mask suddenly coming to life in order to express, with the 4 black holes of its eyes, its nose, and its mouth, the extreme anger, the mighty fury of a demon, and not a ray of light from the sockets, for, as I learned later, you cannot see his blazing eyes except in the dark. Erik just had some bad acne. That's all it is. I fell back against the wall, and he came up to me, grinding his teeth, and as I fell upon my knees he hissed mad, incoherent words and curses at me. Leaning over me, he cried, "Look, you want to see, see, feast your eyes, glut your soul on my cursed ugliness. Look at Erik's face. Now you know the face of the voice. You were not content to hear me. You wanted to know what I looked like. Oh, you women are so inquisitive. Well, are you satisfied? I'm a very good-looking fellow, eh? When a woman has seen me as you have, she belongs to me. She loves me forever. I am a kind of Don Juan, you know." And drawing himself up to his full height, with his hand on his hip, wagging the hideous thing that was his head on his shoulders, he roared, "Look at me. I am Don Juan triumphant." And when I turned away my head and begged for mercy, he drew it to him brutally, twisting his dead fingers into my hair. "Enough, enough!" cried Raoul. "I will kill him. In heaven's name, Christine, tell me where the dining room on the lake is. I must kill him." "Oh, be quiet, Raoul, if you want to know." "Yes, I want to know how and why you went back. I must know. But, in any case, I will kill him." "Oh, Raoul, listen, listen." He dragged me by my hair, and then, oh, it is too horrible. "Well, what? Out with it!" exclaimed Raoul fiercely. "Out with it, quick!" Then he hissed at me. "Ah, I frighten you, do I? I dare say. Perhaps you think that I have another mask, and that this, my head, is a mask. Well, he roared. "Tear it off, as you did the other. Come along. I insist. Your hands. Give me your hands." And he seized my hands and dug them into his awful face. He tore his flesh with my nails, tore his terrible, dead flesh with my nails. "No," he shouted, while his throat throbbed and panted like a furnace. "Know that I am built up of death from head to foot, and that it is a corpse that loves you and adores you, and will never, never leave you. Look, I am not laughing now. I am crying, crying for you, Christine, who have torn off my mask, and who therefore can never leave me again. As long as you have thought me handsome, you could have come back, but, now that you know my hideousness, you would run away for good. So I shall keep you here. Why did you want to see me? Oh, mad Christine, who wanted to see me? When my own father never saw me, and when my mother, so as not to see me, made me a present of my first mask." He had let me go at last, and was dragging himself about on the floor, uttering terrible sobs. And then he crawled away like a snake, went into his room, closed the door, and left me alone to my reflections. Presently I heard the sound of the organ, and when I began to understand Erik's contemptuous phrase when he spoke about opera music, what I now heard was utterly different from what I had heard up to then. His Don Juan triumphant, for I had not a doubt but that he had rushed to his masterpiece, to forget the horror of the moment, seemed to me at first one long, awful, magnificent sob. But, little by little, it expressed every emotion, every suffering of which mankind is capable. It intoxicated me, and I opened the door that separated us. Erik rose as I entered, but dared not turn in my direction. "Erik," I cried, "show me your face without fear. I swear that you are the most unhappy and sublime of men, and if ever again I shiver when I look at you, it will be because I am thinking of the splendor of your genius." Then Erik turned around, for he believed me, and I also had faith in myself. He fell at my feet, with words of love in his dead mouth, and the music had ceased. He kissed the hem of my dress, and did not see that I closed my eyes. What more can I tell you, dear? You now know the tragedy. I went on for a fortnight during which I lied to him. My lies were as hideous as the monster who inspired them, but they were the price of my liberty. I burned his mask, and I managed so well that, even when he was not singing, he tried to catch my eye, like a dog sitting by his master. He was my faithful slave, and paid me endless little attentions. Gradually I gave him such confidence that he ventured to take me walking by the bank of the lake and to row me in the boat on its leaden waters. Toward the end of my captivity, he let me out through the gate that closed the underground passages of the Rue Scribe. Here a carriage awaited us and took us to the boys. The boys! The night when we met you was nearly fatal to me, for he is terribly jealous of you, and I had to tell him that you were going away. Then, at last, after a fortnight of that horrible captivity, during which I was filled with pity, enthusiasm, despair, and horror by turns, he believed me when I said, "I will come back." "And you went back, Christine?" groaned Raoul. "Yes, dear, I must tell you that it was not his frightful threats that set when... Excuse me? Yes, dear, I must tell you that it was not his frightful threats when setting me free that helped me to keep my word, but the harrowing sob which he gave on the threshold of the tomb. The sob attached me to the unfortunate man more than I myself suspected when saying goodbye to him. Poor Erik." "Christine," said Raoul, rising, "you tell me that you love me. but you had recovered your liberty hardly a few hours before you returned to Erik. Remember the masked ball. Yes. And do you remember those hours which I passed with you, Raoul, to the great danger of both of us? I doubted your love for me during those hours. Do you doubt it still, Raoul? Then know that each of my visits to Erik increased my horror of him, for each of those visits, instead of calming him as I hoped, made him mad with love. And I am so frightened, so frightened. You are frightened, but you love me. If Erik were good-looking, would you love me, Christine? This is so silly. If he was cute, would you still love me? Raoul, calm yourself. She rose in her turn, put her two trembling arms round the young man's neck, and said, "Oh, my betrothed of a day, if I did not love you, I would not give you my lips. Take them, for the first time, and the last." He kissed her lips, but the night that surrounded them was rent asunder. They fled as at the approach of a storm, and their eyes, filled with dread of Erik, showed them, before they disappeared, high up above them, an immense night bird that stared at them with blazing eyes and seemed to cling to the string of Apollo's lyre. End of chapter 12. Exactly. Dude, now is not the time to ask this. Okay, so chapter 12 was all about Christine telling her side of the story. And basically, like, she got real close to Erik. She learned that Erik is not a ghost, nor is he the angel of music, but he's just some dude who may or may not be alive. And let's see what else happens. We found Cesar, the horse that went missing a long time ago, and Christine, like, ripped off Erik's mask, and apparently he's hideous, and Erik is like, "Yeah, you think I'm hideous? You think this is another mask?" and grabs her hands and, like, makes her, like, use her nails to, like, rip at his skin, which that in itself is terrifying. And he's like, "I'm so ugly. My dad never saw me, and my mom gave me a present of a mask." And so Erik was like, "I would have let you go when you thought that I was handsome. However, now that you know that I'm not, I will never let you go." It's just all very weird. So she's telling Raoul all of this, and there's, like, a bird and, like, a shadow that's, like, listening to all of this happen. And I'm sure that Erik's gonna find everything out. I know it. I know he is, and he's gonna be mad. He's gonna be mad. And Raoul just continues to be jealous and insecure in his own handsomeness. And it's just like, "Well, if he was handsome, would you still love me?" And then they have a kiss, which is awkward. This is like, well, they say that it's their first kiss, so I'm guessing the kiss that they had in the dressing room was not on the lips, which makes me even more confused about this kiss. The way that it was described in the dressing room was a brother and sister united in their smitten loss of a loved one or something like that. And it's like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what kind of kiss that is. I don't understand. The way he's described is like he's a zombie. Yeah, he's, like, not alive. He's like, you can touch him. I Zombie Erik. Zombie Phantom. I don't understand. I don't know. Okay. Zombie fan. Okay. Chapter 13. A master stroke of the trapdoor lover. Excuse me? Raoul and Christine ran, eager to escape from the roof and the blazing eyes that showed only in the dark. And they did not stop before they came to the 8th floor on the way down. There was no performance at the opera that night, and the passages were empty. Suddenly, an odd-looking form stood before them and blocked the road. No, not this way. And the form pointed to another passage, by which they were to reach the wings. Raoul wanted to stop and ask for an explanation, but the form, which wore a sort of long frock coat and a pointed hat, said, "Quick! Go away quickly!" Christine was already dragging Raoul, compelling him to start running again. "But who is he? Who is that man?" he asked. Christine replied, "It's the Persian." "What's he doing here?" "Nobody knows. He is always in the opera." "You are making me run away, for the first time in my life. If we really saw Erik, what I ought to have done is to nail him to Apollo's lyre, just as we nail the owls to the walls of our Breton farms, and there would have been no more question of him." "My dear Raoul, you would first have to climb up to Apollo's lyre. That is no easy matter." The blazing eyes there. There we go. Oh, you are getting like me now, seeing him everywhere. What I took for blazing eyes was probably a couple of stars shining through the strings of the lyre. And Christine went down another floor, with Raoul following her. As you have quite made up your mind to go, Christine, I assure you it would be better to go at once. Why wait for tomorrow? He may have heard us tonight. No, no, he is working, I tell you, at his Don Juan triumphant, and not thinking of us. You're so sure that you can keep on looking behind you. Come to my dressing room. Hadn't we better meet outside the opera? Never, till we go away for good. It would bring us bad luck. If I did not keep my word, I promised him to see you only here. It's a good thing for me that he allowed you even that. Do you know," said Raoul bitterly, "that it was very plucky of you to let us play at being engaged?" "Why, my dear, he knows all about it. He said, 'I trust you, Christine. Monsieur is in love with you, and is going abroad. Before he goes I want him to be as happy as I am.'" "Are people so unhappy when they love?" "Yes, Christine, when they love and are not sure of being loved." They came to Christine's dressing room. "Why do you think that you are safer in this room than on the stage?" asked Raoul. "You heard him through the walls here, therefore he can certainly hear us." "No. He gave me his word not to be behind the walls of my dressing room again, and I believe Eric's word. This room and my bedroom on the lake are for me exclusively, and not to be approached by him." "How can you have gone from this room into that dark passage, Christine? Suppose we try to repeat your movements. Shall we?" "It is dangerous, dear, for the glass might carry me off again, and, instead of running away, I should be obliged to go to the end of the secret passage to the lake, and there call Erik." "Would he hear you?" "Erik will hear me wherever I call him. He told me so. He is a very curious genius. You must not think, Raoul, that he is simply a man who amuses himself by living underground. He does things that no other man could do. He knows things which nobody in the world knows." "Take care, Christine. You are making a ghost of him again." "No, he is not a ghost. He is a man of heaven and earth. That is all." "A man of heaven and earth. That is all. A nice way to speak of him. And are you still resolved to run away from him?" "Yes, tomorrow." "Tomorrow. You will have no resolve left." "Then, Raoul, you must run away with me in spite of myself. Is that understood?" "I shall be here at 12 tomorrow night. I shall keep my promise, whatever happens. You say that, after listening to the performance, he is to wait for you in the dining room on the lake?" "Yes." "And how are you to reach him, if you don't know how to go out by the glass?" Why? By going straight to the edge of the lake. Oh, you mean the creepy zombie who lives in the sewers gave you his word? No issues with that. It's on the up and up, absolutely. Christine opened the box, took out an enormous key, and showed it to Raoul. What's that? He asked. The key of the gate to the underground passage in the Rue Scribe. I understand, Christine. It leads straight to the lake. Give it to me, Christine, will you? Never, she said. That would be treacherous. We can't be treacherous. Heavens, no. Suddenly, Christine changed color. A mortal pallor overspread her features. Oh, heavens! She cried. Erik! Erik, have pity on me! Hold your tongue, said Raoul. You told me he could hear you. But the singer's attitude became more and more inexplicable. She wrung her fingers repeatedly with her distraught air. Oh, heaven, heaven! But what is it? What is it? Raoul implored. The ring, the gold ring he gave me. Oh, so Erik gave you that ring? Now is not the time, Raoul, and we already knew this. It wasn't the horse. You know he did, Raoul. But what you don't know is that, when he gave it to me, he said, I give you back your liberty, Christine, on condition that this ring is always on your finger. As long as you keep it, you will be protected against all danger, and Erik will remain your friend. But woe to you if you ever part with it, for Erik will have his revenge. My dear, the ring is gone. Woe to both of us. They both looked for the ring, but could not find it. Christine refused to be pacified. It was while I gave you that kiss, up above, under Apollo's lyre, she said. The ring must have slipped from my finger and dropped into the street. We can never find it, and what misfortunes are in store for us now. Oh, to run away! Let us run away at once, Raoul insisted once more. She hesitated. He thought that she was going to say yes. Then her bright pupils became dimmed, and she said, No! Tomorrow! And she left him hurriedly, still wringing and rubbing her fingers as though she hoped to bring the ring back like that. It is weird, yes. It is very weird. Not to insult the author, sure, but it's like aliens trying to imitate human behavior. It is very stilted, and I'm wondering, so this was originally written in French, and I'm wondering if the translation is just stilted and like something is amiss. And so like the adaptations are more like, yeah, they're different, and I'm wondering if they more align with what it's supposed to be. I don't know. But yeah, I totally agree with you that the it's what human behavior is on paper rather than like what actual human behavior is. The horse nailed the horse. Perfect. Humans. Raoul went home, greatly perturbed at all that he had heard. If I don't save her from the hands of that humbug, he said aloud as he went to bed, she is lost. But I shall save her. He put out his lamp, and felt a need to insult Erik in the dark. Thrice over he shouted, Humbug! 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 But suddenly he raised himself on his elbow. A cold sweat poured from his temples. Two eyes, like blazing coals, had appeared at the foot of his bed. They stared at him, fixedly, terribly, in the darkness of the night. Raoul was no coward, and yet he trembled. He put out a groping, hesitating hand toward the table by his bedside. He found the matches and lit his candle. The eyes disappeared. Still uneasy in his mind, he thought to himself, She told me that his eyes only showed in the darkness. His eyes have disappeared in the light, but he may still be here." And he rose, hunted about, went around the room. He looked under his bed like a child. Then he thought himself absurd, got into bed again, and blew out the candle. The eyes reappeared. He sat up and stared back at them with all the courage he possessed. Then he cried, "Is that you, Erik? Man, genius, or ghost? Is it you?" He reflected. "If it's he, he's on the balcony." Then he ran to the chest of drawers and groped for his revolver. He opened the balcony window, looked out, saw nothing, and closed the window again. He went back to bed, shivering, for the night was cold, and put the revolver on the table within his reach. The eyes were still there, at the foot of the bed. Were they between the bed and the window pane, or behind the pane, that is to say, on the balcony? That was what Raoul wanted to know. He also wanted to know if those eyes belonged to a human being. He wanted to know everything. Then, patiently, calmly, he seized his revolver and took aim. He aimed a little above the two eyes. Surely, if they were eyes, and if above those eyes there was a forehead, and if Raoul was not too clumsy. The shot made a terrible din amid the silence of the slumbering house, and, while footsteps came hurrying along the passage, Raoul sat up with outstretched arm, ready to fire again if need be. This time, the two eyes had disappeared. Servants appeared, carrying lights. Count Felipe, terribly anxious. "What is it?" "I think I have been dreaming," replied the young man. "I fired 2 stars that kept me from sleeping." "You're raving. Or are you ill? For God's sake tell me, Raoul, what has happened?" And the Count seized hold of the revolver. No, I'm not raving. Besides, we shall soon see." He got out of bed, put on a dressing gown and slippers, took a light from the hands of a servant, and, opening the window, stepped out on the balcony. The Count saw that the window had been pierced by a bullet at a man's height. Raoul was leaning over the balcony with his handle. "Aha!" he said. "Blood! Blood! Here, there, more blood! That's a good sign. A ghost who bleeds is less dangerous." He grinned. "Raoul!" The Count was shaking him as though he were trying to waken a sleepwalker. "But my dear brother, I'm not asleep," Raoul protested impatiently. "You can see the blood for yourself. I thought I had been dreaming and firing at 2 stars. It was Erik's eyes, and here is his blood. After all, perhaps I was wrong to shoot, and Christine is quite capable of never forgiving me. All this would not have happened if I had not drawn the curtains before going to bed." "Raoul, have you suddenly gone mad? Wake up!" "What, still? You would do better to help me find Erik, for, after all, a ghost who bleeds can also always be found." The Count's valet said, "That is so, sir. There is blood on the balcony." The other manservant brought a lamp, by the light of which they examined the balcony carefully. The marks of blood followed the rail till they reached a gutter spout. Then they went up the gutter spout. "My dear fellow," said Count Felipe, "you have fired at a cat." "Oh no, little kitten." "The misfortune is," said Raoul with a grin, "that it's quite possible. With Erik you never know. Is it Erik? Is it the cat? Is it the ghost? No. With Erik you can't tell." Raoul went on making this strange sort of remarks which corresponded so intimately and logically with the preoccupation of his brain, and which, at the same time, tended to persuade many people that his mind was unhinged. The Count himself was seized with this idea, and, later, examining magistrate, on receiving the report of the commissary of police, came to the same conclusion. "Who is Erik?" said the Count, pressing his brother's hand. "He is my rival. And, if he's not dead, it's a pity." He dismissed the servants with a wave of the hand, and the 2 Chagny's were left alone. but the men were not out of earshot before the Count's valet heard Raoul distinctly and emphatically. "I shall carry off Christine tonight." "I know the poor little kitten." "Not the kitty." So sad. This phrase was afterward repeated to Monsieur Ferré, the examining magistrate, but no one ever knew exactly what passed between the two brothers at this interview. The servants declared that this was not their first quarrel. Their voices penetrated the wall, and it was always an actress called Christine Daaé that was in question. At breakfast, the early morning breakfast which the Count took in his study, Felipe sent for his brother. Raoul arrived silent and gloomy. The scene was a very short one. Felipe handed his brother a copy of the Epoque? Epoch? Epoch, and said, "Read that." The Viscount, not Viscount. I keep wanting to say Viscount. I have learned that that's not how you pronounce it, and here I am still trying to pronounce it that way. Anyway, he read, "The latest news in the Faubourg is that there is a promise of marriage between Mademoiselle Christine Daaé and the opera singer and Monsieur le Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. If the gossips are to be credited, Count Felipe has sworn that, for the first time on record, the Chagnys shall not keep their promise. But, as love is all-powerful, at the opera as, and even more than, elsewhere, we wonder how Count Felipe intends to prevent the Viscount, his brother, from leading the new Margarita to the altar. The two brothers are said to adore each other, but the Count is curiously mistaken if he imagines that brotherly love will triumph over love pure and simple." "You see, Raoul," said the Count, "you are making us ridiculous. That little girl has turned your head with her ghost stories." Raoul had evidently repeated Christine's narrative to his brother during the night. All that he now said was, "Goodbye, Felipe. Have you quite made up your mind? You are going tonight? With her?" No reply. "Surely you will not do anything so foolish. I shall know how to prevent you." "Goodbye, Felipe," said Raoul again, and left the room. This scene was described to the examining magistrate by the Count himself, who did not see Raoul again until that evening at the opera, a few minutes before Christine's disappearance. Raoul, in fact, devoted the whole day to his preparations for the flight. The horses, the carriage, the coachman, the provisions, the luggage, the money required for the journey, the road to be taken, he had resolved not to go by train, so as to throw the ghost off the scent. All this had to be settled and provided for, and it occupied him until 9 o'clock at night. At 9 o'clock, a sort of travelling barouche with the curtains of its windows closed down, took its place in the rank on the rotunda side. It was drawn by two powerful horses, driven by a coachman whose face was almost concealed in the long folds of a muffler. In front of this travelling carriage were 3 brigands, belonging respectively to Carlotta, who had suddenly returned to Paris, to Sorelli, and, at the head of the rank, to Comte Philippe de Chagny. No one left the barouche. The coachman remained on the box, and the 3 other coachmen remained on theirs. A shadow, in a long black cloak, and a soft black felt hat passed along the pavement between the rotunda and the carriages, examined the barouche carefully, went up to the horses and the coachman, and then moved away without saying a word. The magistrate afterwards believed that his shadow was that of the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny, but I do not agree, seeing that that evening, as every evening, the Vicomte was wearing a tall hat, which hats, besides, was subsequently found. I am more inclined to think that the shadow was that of the ghost, who knew all about the whole affair, as the reader will soon perceive. They were giving Faust, as it happened, before a splendid house. The Faubourg was magnificently represented, and the paragraph in that morning's newspaper had already produced its effect, for all eyes were turned to the box in which Count Felipe sat alone, apparently in a very indifferent and careless frame of mind. The feminine element in the brilliant audience seemed curiously puzzled, and the Viscount's absence gave rise to any amount of whispering behind the fans. Christine met with a rather cold reception. That special audience could not forgive her for aiming so high. The singer noticed this unfavorable attitude of a portion of the house and was confused by it. The regular frequenters of the opera, who pretended to know the truth about the Viscount's love story, exchanged significant smiles at certain passages in Margarita's part, and they made a show of turning and looking at Felipe's box when Christine sang, I wish I could, but know who was he that addressed me, if he was noble, or, at least, what his name is. The Count sat with his chin on his hand and seemed to pay no attention to these manifestations. He kept his eyes fixed on the stage, but his thoughts appeared to be far away. Christine lost her self-assurance more and more. She trembled. She felt on the verge of a breakdown. Carolus Fonta wondered if she was ill, if she could keep the stage until the end of the garden act. In the front of the house, people remembered the catastrophe that had befallen Carlotta at the back of that act, and the historic goack which had momentarily interrupted her career in Paris. Just then, Carlotta made her entrance in a box facing the stage, a sensational entrance. Poor Christine raised her eyes upon this fresh subject of excitement. She recognized her rival. She thought she saw a sneer on her lips. That saved her. She forgot everything in order to triumph once more. From that moment the prima donna sang with all her heart and soul. She tried to surpass all that she had done till then, and she succeeded. In the last act, when she began the invocation to the angels, she made all the members of the audience feel as though they too had wings. In the center of the amphitheater, a man stood up and remained standing, facing the singer. It was Raoul, holy angel in heaven blessed. And Christine, her arms outstretched, her throat filled with music, the glory of her hair falling over her bare shoulders, uttered the divine cry, my spirit longs with thee to rest. It was at that moment that the stage was suddenly plunged into darkness. It happened so quickly that the spectators hardly had time to utter a sound of stupefaction, for the gas at once lit up the stage again. But Christine was no longer there. What had become of her? What was that miracle? All exchanged glances without understanding, and the excitement at once reached its height. Nor was the tension any less great on the stage itself. Men rushed from the wings to the spot where Christine had been singing that very instant. The performance was interrupted amid the greatest disorder. Where had Christine gone? What witchcraft had snatched her away before the eyes of thousands of enthusiastic onlookers, and from the arms of Carolus Fonta himself? It was as though the angels had really carried her up to rest. Raoul, still standing up in the amphitheater, had uttered a cry. Count Felipe had sprung to his feet in his box. People looked at the stage, at the Count, at Raoul, and wondered if this curious event was connected in any way with the paragraph in that morning's newspaper. But Raoul hurriedly left his seat. The Count disappeared from his box, and while the curtain was lowered, the subscribers rushed to the door that led behind the scenes. The rest of the audience waited amid an indescribable hubbub. Everyone spoke at once. Everyone tried to suggest an explanation of the extraordinary incident. At last, the curtain rose slowly, and Carolus Fonta stepped to the conductor's desk and, in a sad and serious voice, said, Ladies and gentlemen, an unprecedented event has taken place and thrown us into a state of the greatest alarm. Our sister artist Christine Daaé has disappeared before our eyes, and nobody can tell us how. End of chapter 13. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so chapter 13, we get. So Christine and Raoul are running. They have suspicion that Erik has heard them talking and them plotting. Well, at least Raoul does. Raoul goes home for the night, and when he turns off the light at the foot of his bed, he sees these very black eyes just staring at him. And so he like lights a match really quickly, and then the eyes disappear. And he remembers Christine telling him that you can only see the eyes at night, or like in pitch black. And so Raoul is like, okay, but he's still here, obviously. So he like blows out his candle and he snuffs it, and then the eyes like reappear back at the foot of the bed. But he can't tell if it's inside or if it's outside on the balcony. And so he like takes his revolver and he shoots. He aims like in between, like, and just a little above where the eyes are. And like his brother is startled, so are the servants from hearing a gunshot. They run upstairs. His brother is like, dude, like, what's going on? And Raoul is like muttering like a crazy person everything that has happened, and Felipe thinks that he's still sleeping. And so he's like trying to wake him up, and Raoul is like, you idiot, I am awake. And the things that I'm saying, yes, they sound crazy, but they're true. So they go out to the balcony and they like see blood, and Raoul is like, excellent, I have shot the ghost, we can find him. It is much easier to find a ghost that is bleeding. Turns out it was a cat that was injured. Poor little kitty. The next day there is an article in the paper that talks about Christine and Raoul and their like love affair, and that they're gonna like run away together, all of those things. That night is the night that that Christine and Raoul are supposed to run away. But it's interrupted. So Christine is singing and Raoul stands up and is just like enamored. And then there is like the lights go out. The lights come back on. Christine nowhere to be seen. Gone. Disappeared. They close the curtains. They're trying to figure things out in the backstage, and the curtains raise. Christine's counterpart, her actor counterpart, comes out and is like, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know where Christine is. She's disappeared. We don't know what happened. And that's where the chapter ends. Interesting. Very interesting. So that's cool. All right. Chapter 14. The singular attitude of a safety pin. Behind the curtain, there was an indescribable crowd. Artists, scene shifters, dancers, supers, choristers, subscribers were all asking questions, shouting and bustling and hustling one another. What became of her? She's run away? With the Vicomte de Chagny, of course. No, with the Count. Ah, here's Carlotta. Carlotta did the trick. No, it was the ghost. And a few laughed, especially as a careful examination of the trapdoors and boards had put the idea of an accident out of the question. Amid this noisy throng, 3 men stood talking in a low voice and with despairing gestures. They were Gabriel, the chorus master, Mercier, the acting manager, and Remy, the secretary. They retired to a corner of the lobby by which the stage communicates with the wide passage leading to the foyer of the ballet. Here they stood and argued behind the enormous properties. "I knocked on the door," said Remy. "They did not answer. Perhaps they are not in the office. In any case, it's impossible to find out, for they took the keys with them." They, were obviously the managers, who had given orders during the last entr'acte that they were not to be disturbed on any pretext whatever. They were not in to anybody. All the same, exclaimed Gabriel, a singer isn't run away with from the middle of the stage every day. Did you shout that to them? Asked Mercier, impatiently. I'll go back again, said Remy, and disappeared at a run. Thereupon the stage manager arrived. Well, Monsieur Mercier, are you coming? What are you two doing here? You're wanted, Mr. Acting Manager. I refuse to know or do anything before the commissary arrives, declared Mercier. I have sent for Mifroid. We shall see when he comes. And I tell you that you ought to go down to the organ at once. Not before the commissary comes. I've been down to the organ myself already. Ah, and what did you see? Well, I saw nobody. Do you hear? Nobody. What do you want me to go down there for? You're right, said the stage manager, frantically pushing his hands through his rebellious hair. You're right. But there might be someone at the organ who could tell us how the stage came to be suddenly darkened. Now Mauclair is nowhere to be found. Do you understand that? Mauclair was the gas man, who dispensed day and night at will on the stage of the opera. Mauclair is not to be found, repeated Mercier, taken aback. Well, what about his assistants? There's no Mauclair, and there's no assistants. No one at the lights, I tell you. You can imagine, roared the stage manager, that little girl must have been carried off by someone else. She didn't run away by herself. It was a calculated stroke, and we have to find out about it. And what are the managers doing all this time? I gave orders that no one was to go down to the lights, and I posted a fireman in front of the gas man's box, beside the organ. Wasn't that right? Yes, that's right, quite right. And now, let's wait for the commissary. The stage manager walked away, shrugged his shoulders, fuming, muttering insults at those milksops who remained quietly squatting in a corner while the whole theatre was topsy-turvy. Gabriel and Mercier were not so quiet as all that. Only they had received an order that paralyzed them. The managers were not to be disturbed on any account. Remy had violated that order and met with no success. At that moment, he returned from his new expedition, wearing a curiously startled air. Well, have you seen them? Asked Mercier. Moncharmin opened the door at last. His eyes were starting out of his head, and I thought he meant to strike me. I could not get a word in, and what do you think he shouted at me? Have you a safety pin? No. Well, then, clear out. I tried to tell him that an unheard-of thing had happened to the stage, but he roared, a safety pin! Give me a safety pin at once! A boy heard him. He was bellowing like a bull, ran up with a safety pin and gave it to him, whereupon Moncharmin slammed the door in my face. And there you are. And couldn't you have said Christine Daaé? I should like to have seen you in my place. He was foaming at the mouth. He thought of nothing but this safety pin. I believe, if they hadn't brought him one on the spot, he would have fallen down in a fit. Oh, all this isn't natural, and our managers are going mad. Besides, it can't go on like this. I'm not used to being treated in that fashion. Suddenly Gabriel whispered, It's another trick of the OG's. Remy gave a grin. Mercier a sigh, and seemed about to speak, but, meeting Gabriel's eyes, said nothing. However, Mercier felt his responsibility increased as the minutes passed without the managers appearing, and at last he could stand it no longer. Look here, I'll go and hunt them out myself. Gabriel, turning very gloomy and serious, stopped him. Be careful what you're doing, Mercier. If they're staying in their office, it's probably because they have to. OG has more than one trick in his bag. But Mercier shook his head. That's their lookout? I'm going. If people had listened to me, the police would have known everything long ago. And he went. What's everything? Asked Remy. What was there to tell the police? Why don't you answer, Gabriel? Ah, so you know something. Well, you would do better to tell me, too, if you don't want me to shout out that you are all going mad. Yes, that's what you are. Mad. Gabriel put on a stupid look and pretended not to understand the private secretary's unseemly outburst. "What something am I supposed to know?" he said. "I don't know what you mean." Remy began to lose his temper. "This evening Richard and Moncharmin were behaving like lunatics here, between the acts." "Never noticed it," growled Gabriel, very much annoyed. "Then you're the only one. Do you think that I didn't see them, and that Monsieur Parabis, the manager of the Crédit Central, noticed nothing, and that Monsieur de la Borderie, the ambassador, has no eyes to see with? Why, all the subscribers were pointing at our managers." "But what were our managers doing?" asked Gabriel, putting on his most innocent air. "What were they doing? You know better than anyone what they were doing. You were there, and you were watching them, you and Mercier, and you were the only two who didn't laugh." "I don't understand." Gabriel raised his arms and dropped them to his sides again, which gesture was meant to convey that the question did not interest him in the least. Remy continued. "What is the sense of this new mania of theirs? Why won't they have anyone come near them again?" "What? Why won't they have anyone come near them? And why won't they let anyone touch them?" "Really, have you noticed that they won't let anyone touch them? That is certainly odd." "Ah, so you admit it. And high time, too. And then they walk backward." "Backward? You have seen our managers walk backward? Why, I thought that only crabs walked backwards." "Don't laugh, Gabriel, don't laugh." "Not laughing," protested Gabriel, looking as solemn as a judge. "Perhaps you can tell me this, Gabriel, as you're an intimate friend of the management. When I went up to Monsieur Richard outside the foyer during the garden interval, with my hand out before me, why did Monsieur Moncharmin hurriedly whisper to me, 'Go away. Go away. Whatever you do, don't touch le directeur'? Am I supposed to have an infectious disease? It's incredible. And a little later, when Monsieur de la Bourdie went up to Monsieur Richard, didn't you see Monsieur Moncharmin fling himself between them, and hear him explain, 'Monsieur l'ambassadeur, I entreat you not to touch Monsieur le directeur'? It's incredible. And what was Richard doing meanwhile? What was he doing? Why, you saw him. He turned about, bowed in front of him, thought there was nobody in front of him, and withdrew backward. Backward. And Moncharmin, behind Richard, also turned round. That is, he described a semicircle behind Richard and also walked backward. And they went like that to the staircase leading to the manager's office. Backward, backward, backward. Well, if they are not mad, will you explain what it means?" "Perhaps they are practicing a figure in the ballet," suggested Gabriel, without much conviction in his voice. The secretary was furious at this wretched joke, made at so dramatic a moment. He knit his brows and contracted his lips. Then he put his mouth to Gabriel's ear. "Don't be so sly, Gabriel. There are things going on for which you and Mercier are partly responsible." "What do you mean?" asked Gabriel. "Christine Daaé is not the only one who suddenly disappeared tonight." "Oh, nonsense." "There's no nonsense about it. Perhaps you can tell me why, when Mother Giry came down to the foyer just now, Mercier took her by the hand and hurried her away with him." "Really," said Gabriel, "I never saw it." "You did see it, Gabriel, for you went with Mercier and Mother Giry to Mercier's office. Since then you and Mercier have been seen, but no one has seen Mother Giry." "You think we've eaten her?" "No, but you've locked her up in the office, and anyone passing the office can hear her yelling, 'Oh, the scoundrels!'" At this point of this singular conversation, Mercier arrived out of breath. "There," he said, in a gloomy voice, "it's worse than ever." I shouted, "It's a serious matter. Open the door. It's I, Mercier." I heard footsteps. The door opened, and Moncharmin appeared. He was very pale, and he said, "What do you want?" And I answered, "Someone has run away with Christine." What do you think he said? "And a good job, too." And he slammed the door, after putting this in my hand. Mercier opened his hand. Remy and Gabriel looked at it. "The safety pin!" cried Remy. Strange, muttered Gabriel, who could not stop shivering. Suddenly, a voice made them all three turn round. Beg your pardon, gentlemen. Could you tell me where Christine Daaé is? In spite of the seriousness of the circumstances, the absurdity of the question would have made them roar with laughter, if they had not caught sight of the face so sorrow-stricken that they were at once seized with pity. It was the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. End of chapter 15. All right, so we are backstage and we have our various directors and they are freaking out. And one of them, Remy, is like, you guys know something that you're not telling me. Everybody knows something. What is happening? I know also that Madame Geary, you've locked her in a closet. I don't understand why. Also, why are the managers being so insanely weird? They won't let anybody touch them. They won't let anybody near them, and they're walking backwards. What is happening? And Gabriel's trying to, like, answer, like, around these questions and not really, like, giving an answer, whether he can't or he just doesn't know, like, um, and then, so, like, as we're getting this conversation, which is interesting, I do appreciate the, like, panic moments that they're having. Then Raoul comes backstage and is asking if they know where Christine is. And that is where the chapter ends. And that is going to be where we end tonight. We are 51% of the way through, which may or may not be misleading. We all know that there's sometimes notes at the end, and so, like, things happen. But we'll pick up right where we left off next time. I'm enjoying it. People are weird, but I'm enjoying it. So yes, that is it for tonight. I hope you all have a great rest of your night. I will see you very soon. If not, I hope to see you soon. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you soon. That's what I meant to say. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you, and I 1000% appreciate your support. Yes, gotta go practice walking backwards. See you all very soon. Goodbye.